I asked myself that very question 30 years ago when I was getting ready to go from this nonprofit foundation into the corporate world. And I asked one of my mentors who had been with the Ford Foundation for many years. And I went to him and I said, Bill, if I join the corporate sector, am I, joining the dark side? And he said to me, he said, Michael, what you will be able to do in the corporate sector to change society and environment will dwarf the small $20,000 grants you are making in the nonprofit sector.
Welcome to the CSO Impact Podcast, where we talk to leaders in sustainability, and we're discussing how work can be a good place to impact the planet in a positive way. Now, I'm your host, Harald Neidhardt, and today I'm really pleased to welcome Michael Kobori. And up until a few days ago, he was the Chief Sustainability Officer of Starbucks and had a tremendous career, including he was also our gold winner of the American CSO Awards recently September during Climate Week in New York, where we met. We also met before in Tuscany, which was lovely at a conference there. And now I have the pleasure to be probably one of the first people to talk to Michael after his start into a new career as a retiree. And we want to hear everything what his plans are, but also reflect from this position on his career. So again, pleased to welcome you. How are you, Michael? So great to have you on the podcast.
Harald, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And it's such a pleasure to see you again. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast today.
Fantastic. And well, you are in San Francisco, on the other side of the world from us here in Europe, and working with a global brand, actually with several global brands. And I think also, let's say, looking at you have a very unique perspective, and you have seen colleagues, you have seen the role of sustainability evolve over decades and then bring it maybe to fruition in your most recent job. Why don't we talk a little bit first about, let's say, today or where you're looking forward to now? What are you doing with all your time now? What are your plans on the horizon as a freelancer, as a free man?
Well, Harald, after working for about 40 years with not so much as more than a 2 or 3 week break, I have decided to take these next 6 months as somewhat of a sabbatical, if you will. And so I am going to pause on any professional commitments that I have and really focus on my personal and family's wellness, well-being, the spiritual, physical, mental well-being, and just recharge myself and my relationships. And I think I've actually been on vacation for a few weeks, so I'm getting a taste of it now.
All right.
And I'm able to, I sleep through the night. I get plenty of sleep. I am working out every day. I like to swim and cycle and do yoga, and I'm spending wonderful time with my family, my wife and my daughters, my mom, who is 89. So just really getting back into enjoying life.
Fantastic. You can feel it that there is something new blossoming, so to say, around you or within you. And I know we talked formally about your heritage being from Japan and your family coming over, and that this is something close to your heart to kind of also not only look at sustainability in nature and corporate, but also the human aspect, society, integration, diversity, all these topics. So I guess you were very, let's say, proud and also pointed out this is important to you to kind of work within the community and or for that community to build bridges and have a little bit of your own shining a light on this diversity, if you will. It's not even a topic. It's just like the human nature, right? Where we're a global species. So,
yes, Harald, very much so. I am of Japanese heritage. I'm a third generation Japanese American, and it always has been an important part of me. I went back and visited Japan when I was a high school student, and it awakened my ethnic heritage.
Yeah.
And as I have experienced my career, first international development, then focused on human rights and labor standards at Levi Strauss and Company. And then after a while, environment was added to that portfolio as well. This connection that you're talking about between people and the planet has always been very, very important to me. And of course, as we do our work for the environment, we realize, and I think we had this conversation before, we're not doing it to save the planet. The planet will exist for billions of years, but we're doing it because if we don't do something about the climate, about pollution, then humanity will not be able to survive and thrive on this planet. And so that connection between the environment and people is so critical to the work that all of us are doing.
Fantastic. I always admire if, we can peel off some of the corporate, but that really see, well, there are the humans inside. And that's exactly the idea of the podcast, to show the human history or the stories behind. And why don't we start a little bit tell us about some of the stories, some of the, journey you have until the last position at Starbucks. So how did you get into that role? What you already had a little bit, but maybe you go into detail.
Yes. Well, I would say, Harald, look, I think you and I are fortunate because our careers have really paralleled the evolution of what we now call corporate sustainability or corporate social responsibility. The rise of this notion that the corporation has a role to play beyond the profit imperative and has a responsibility to society, has a responsibility to the environment, has something that is really, again, paralleled our careers for the past 40 years. And I think both of us have been very fortunate to be part of that movement and in our own small ways influenced that movement. And so that's been very exciting. And I suppose, looking back 40 years ago, neither of us could have predicted this is where we would be ending up in these kinds of roles. And in fact, 40 years ago, the role of a corporate chief sustainability officer was not on anyone's radar or even consciousness. And so I think it's been just extraordinary that this has come to pass. But also our careers have, at least mine, has been very twisting and turning because it wasn't a linear plan to do this. So as sharing, I started my career almost 10 years doing international development for an organization called the Asia Foundation. And so we worked on economic development and human rights in Thailand and Bangladesh, Vietnam. And so that's what I did for 10 years. And then after graduate school, when I joined Levi Strauss and Company, this idea that the factories where the company's products were being manufactured in Asia or in Latin America, that those factories needed to adhere to certain standards of how they treated the workers, that idea was just getting going. And of course, that became the whole labor standards, human rights movement, and now regulations that we experience today. But that began. And so I spent 10, 15 years focused on that at Levi Strauss and Company and building the program with the company and then working with other companies in the industry to build that program and really change the system. And after a number of years, the company asked me to take on the responsibility for the environmental programs because in the supply chain was where most of the environmental impacts existed, whether it was growing cotton, or whether it was manufacturing and processing the denim, washing it and drying it and dyeing it and so forth. And so that is how things began to come together. And after 22 years at Levi Strauss & Company, I decided that it was time to have another experience and see if I could help out in another sector. And that's when I joined Starbucks about 5 years ago.
Right. And maybe because you mentioned the Levi's experience, maybe we stay with fashion just a little bit because and two cool products in a way, but also challenging. And we know fashion, especially right now, with the advent of fast fashion, which is not Levi Strauss, but there's so much fashion, and there's then the Atacama Desert, and where we can see all these piles. Do you think that, first of all, did you make a dent, and or how do you see, what's your light on the view on the fashion industry maybe in general? They have ways to go. We know there's huge challenges, but it's also the consumer behavior, that there's a lot of buying and overconsumption and so on. Now, you have a more freer view on that. What's your view on fashion and maybe even your impact or some of the initiatives that we were driving over there?
Well, Harold, certainly there are many challenges in the industry, but I think also huge opportunities. I'll just share two initiatives that we worked on when I was at Levi Strauss & Company. One was to use less water in the whole life cycle of a pair of denim jeans, as an example. And so in the entire life cycle, from growing the cotton through the processing of the denim, manufacturing, and then sales, that whole life cycle uses about 1,000 gallons of water.
Yeah,
and
crazy.
Most of that is consumed in growing cotton. And of course, chemical use in cotton, pesticides and fertilizers as well. And so the company gathered together with other companies in the industry, most notably H&M and IKEA, and really supported, it's almost 20 years ago now, the establishment of something called the Better Cotton Initiative, that now I believe comprises about 30% of all the world's cotton is grown under this standard that the industry has gotten together with. And of course, it uses less water and less chemicals and provides for stronger working conditions for people who are farming the cotton. And so it has really gotten many in the industry to come on board, work with farmer organizations, work with nonprofits and the industry and suppliers to build this new system for more sustainable cotton agriculture. So that is an example of one of the reasons why I just felt so powerful in a way that, working for this company, we were able to work with others and start something that eventually changed how the cotton is grown. So the other example I was going to mention was a product that we started developing after we told our designers about this whole water impact in the life cycle. The design team got very interested and they said, oh, how can we do our part to reduce the water? And so they came up with this notion of something called water-less jeans that use less water in the manufacturing. And they went to the industrial laundries that had to wash the jeans, and they worked with them to adjust the formulas and see if we could use less water and still get the same look and feel on the product, because you can't compromise the product performance. And lo and behold, they came up with lots of different ways to do that. And eventually the companies that manufacture the huge industrial washing machines that you can put 200 pairs of jeans into, they started changing and developing machines that used a fraction of the water, 70% less water. And now if you go to a denim factory, all the machines are like that.
Yeah.
So again, really change the way that the industry does business.
I was once actually, just remembering, maybe 10, 20 years ago, 20 years ago, in a jeans factory in Turkey. And the interesting fact was, I mean, seeing all the production from cotton inside, from the one end, and then the jeans on the other side. But their kindergarten had 400 kids. I mean,
Yes.
that is what I like. What I mean, there was a village basically of this production thing, and it's such a industry thing, and that you get the, cotton coming in from one side. And what I wonder, and maybe going to Starbucks, both products, if you will, are based on agriculture, but the consumer sees fashion and coffee, pleasure, drinking, being with friends, but we don't really see all the supply chain where there's one farmer, getting the cacao or the coffee beans, and the other one, milling or just getting the growing the cotton. Is there some similarity in thinking of both of these companies of the role of the sustainability team or so in this regard, because you're an agriculture company?
Yes.
Or do you see yourself as a brand, and how is that relationship to nature in these jobs?
Yes. So as you've pointed out, right, both companies are very consumer-facing brands, right? Levi's and Starbucks, very large global brands, lots of consumer interaction. And as we both know, the bulk of the environmental impact occurs in the agricultural raw material production.
Yeah.
Of those products, the coffee as well as the cotton. And so that is why both companies, for many, many years, Starbucks has had a very similar sustainable coffee program in place that looks at environmental impact of coffee, looks at social impact of coffee, looks at the price that farmers get, right? So they've had that program in place for 20 years, similar to the Better Cotton Initiative. And the challenge today, I think, Harald, as you rightly point out, is how do we get that impact, the work that is being done on the other side of the world, in the agricultural communities, far away from where the store is and the customer is? How do we get that and convey that to the customer who is purchasing the cup of coffee or the denim, right? And so they understand, oh, this particular company and this brand has taken the extra step, made that investment to ensure that the product that I am consuming is more sustainable.
Yeah.
So communicating that is really an important area of focus today. And the messages are there, but how do we make it more effective so that the customer really knows and understands?
And this is interesting, maybe because we always talk about the role of the CSO. And in this regard, I mean, obviously the CSO is not the CMO. So how would that work? I mean, would you knock on the door and the CMO and the marketing team and say, hey, look, we got to talk about nature more? And they say, no, we talk about 150 10% rebate because it's Thanksgiving or it's Black Friday or something. So how is that dynamic? Were people open to this kind of positioning in a sustainable way, and we're also talking American companies, which even now or a different position. How is the tension, or how is the working together with a marketing team in these regards and the telling the stories?
Well, Harald, I have experience in two large global brands, Levi's and Starbucks. And I've certainly worked and have colleagues in many other global brands. And I would venture to say that in my experience, every global brand of that size, right, is concerned about sustainability, is concerned about their social impact, because it is what their customers are concerned about. It is what their investors are concerned about, and it is what their employees are concerned about. And the percentages of those cohorts or those groups that are concerned about social and environmental impact continues to expand, particularly with the younger generation. And so these global brands are highly aware that their environmental impact and their social impact are part of the brand identity. Mm-hmm. And part of the brand, at Levi's, we used to call it the brand ecosystem, right? Because if you ask anyone to define what is Levi's stand for or what does Starbucks stand for, they'll say quality, coffee tastes great, right? The jeans make me look good.
Yeah.
They're durable, all of these different aspects. But invariably, they will also talk about, and these companies have strong environmental and social programs. And, Levi's has a stadium, a sports stadium named after, and so forth. So the brand ecosystem is many things. And it's hard to say, there's only one thing that you can do that defines the brand ecosystem. No, the brand strength is comprised of so many things that all have to work together, including the environmental and social impact of that brand.
Let's talk about the social, or let's say environmental impact. And I know one of the, let's say, positive, maybe one of the last big pilots you started in Petaluma, Santa Rosa, up Stinson Beach and a little bit higher north of San Francisco. Tell us a little bit about it, because it's more like a collaborative approach to packaging and packaging waste and recycling. Let's share a little bit about that story.
Yes. Well, as you know, Harald, if anybody knows that this is, you go to Starbucks and you get your beverage and you take it away in a paper cup or a plastic cup. That's a single-use cup. And the company literally uses billions of those every year, right? And so what we need to do as a company, one of our big missions at Starbucks was, how do we eliminate that single-use cup? How do we get customers to, when they're in the cafe, to use a reusable cup? Mm-hmm. Number one, a ceramic cup. When they are coming to the cafe, maybe they have their own thermos that they can bring, right? Or the third option is what you're mentioning that we tried in Petaluma, which is we provide the customer with a cup that is reusable. They can bring it back, put it in a return bin, we reuse it and give it back to them again. Of course, it's sterilized and so forth. So we tried that a year ago, 18 months ago, in the 12 Starbucks that are in Petaluma, the city of Petaluma, California. It was effective, and the customers liked it. We liked it. It helped to reduce the waste. But we realized we could be even more effective if we got together with all of the other coffee brands in the city. And so we reached out with the help of a leading nonprofit organization, the Closed Loop Partnership, and we got all the brands together. Pete's, Dunkin' Donuts, other companies, PepsiCo, other fast food chains, local restaurants, and we all agreed, let's use one purple cup. Purple is a color that isn't associated with any brands. Yeah. Right? It wasn't brand. And we said, okay, let's all use this purple cup as a reusable cup, returnable cup. And so we did. And the city government got behind it. The mayor was there. They put up banners. They put up return bins all throughout the city. So we did that this past summer. Really terrific response from customers, from our employees. And we got very close to our target recycling rates. And we're gonna come back to that next year and expand that pilot.
Yeah. Obviously, one village doesn't change the world, but you have to start somewhere. So that's definitely a good initiative, especially what I said, the cross-pollination with other companies, because then, if everybody has the green straw, which is amazing and recyclable, but then you have 15 others. So I think this is a good example. Are there one or two other initiatives that you might point out to where we want to go to the role of the CSO? So where maybe there was one other initiative that you led, or that was where we worked maybe with different departments. So if this was packaging and so that's probably maybe also design. We talked about marketing. Is there maybe another thing that you said, all right, that was really cool, or you got an award for? I don't know.
Well, Harald, the one other example that I want to share with you is coming back to something we started this conversation with, the connection between people and the planet. And I believe we and your viewers are familiar with the concept of climate justice, environmental justice.
Yep.
And those who can least bear the impact of climate change are the ones who bear a very disproportionate impact of it, right? So when I started Starbucks 5 years ago, I was meeting with all of our different teams, and they were briefing me on what they do. And I sat down and I met with the team that was investing in renewable energy. Of course, the company buys RECs, 100% renewable energy in the US, in Canada. But we also are increasingly shifting to investing in new renewable energy projects. Okay. That is the preferred method now to go about renewables. So I asked, they were talking to me about, here's the projects. I asked them how we decide to invest in a particular project. And they said, where we get tax breaks, or we have lots of stores, all of the different financial criteria. And I asked the team, I said, do we ever decide to invest on the basis of where that population has the most need? Is it an underserved community? And they said, well, not exactly. And I said, well, could we? And they said, sure, we could. So then they went, I didn't think anything of the conversation. They went off, did their homework, came back with the EPA climate justice criteria. And they said, Michael, look, we're going to apply these criteria to help us decide where we make investments in the future. And since then, all the investments, these are big, $75 million in upstate New York in an underserved community to bring community solar to that community. More recently this fall, another $75 million in a indigenous tribal community in San Diego, California. So the tribe, the indigenous people, are benefiting directly from renewable energy that we are investing in with the state of California. So just by asking this question and challenging within the company how you're doing things, you can help to create a big shift.
Very good. So talking about this in a little bit, one more onion layer, so to say, if you would describe certain characteristics or the leadership, let's say, qualities of, if you work in sustainability, what are maybe some of the special traits as a leader or as somebody working in these teams that are required or helped you in your career so far?
Yes. I think about a good friend of mine, a guy named Bob Langert, who used to be the CSO of McDonald's. He wrote a book. And he always used to go to the conferences and talk about the key to being a good sustainability professional is passion, patience, and perseverance. And I said, Bob, I totally agree with you. But there's one other thing that you're missing. It's not a P, it's a C. You need passion, patience, perseverance, but you also need charm. You need to be able to get people, to charm people, to get them to like you, to get them to think about sustainability and why it matters.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to charm people in a way in order to get them to understand and act.
I think that's so cool. It was described also to us as empathy and very communicative and so on. But charm is really, it's first of all, it's another one, but I like it. And not that you have anything from it. No, I'm making a joke. You're obviously the poster child of being a charming person who people want to respond to and align with. So if you think of young Michael 20 years ago, starting into going sustainability, and hopefully we inspire some younger people taking a look at a career in corporate environments and should I really work in the big corporate or should I not really start something as an NGO level? What would you tell young people and or maybe your younger self in one or two tips or maybe a lens to use in looking at these opportunities and challenges, obviously, in this regard?
I asked myself that very question 30 years ago when I was getting ready to go from this nonprofit foundation into the corporate world. And I asked one of my mentors who had been with the Ford Foundation for many years. And I went to him and I said, Bill, if I join the corporate sector, am I joining the dark side?
Yeah.
And he said to me, he said, Michael, what you will be able to do in the corporate sector to change society and the environment will dwarf the small $20,000 grants you are making in the nonprofit sector. And obviously not to diminish what the nonprofit foundations do, but he said the impact that you can make in the corporate world will be far larger than what you could have done making small grants. And he was absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. Now, as a futurist or looking ahead with a fresh pair of eyes and looking back at this role, now, where do you think the CSO role will go? And there was a Freudian slip because some people say, Sandrine, our friend Sandrine Dixon de Clercq, Club of Rome, she said, the next CEO might just be, a CSO before. So that's a trajectory. And others say, I'm in the company as a CSO. I want to get dissolve and the role will be gone. So these are the two positions and there's lots of things in between. What's your view on the role of the Chief Sustainability Officer for the next couple of years?
Well, the company H&M did have a CEO who was a former Chief Sustainability Officer, Helena Helmerson, who I knew well. She became the CEO of the company. So I think certainly that is one route, right? And it indicates to me that this role of the CEO has become so complex that the CEO does need to pay attention to the social and environmental impact of the company. It's part of it. I've also been told and seen the research that says the role of the CSO is the most similar to the CEO of any other role in the company because you have to work with every function and every business unit. And you essentially have a environmental profit and loss statement that you are responsible for, right? And the trick now is to meld that with the financial profit and loss statement so it's integrated, right? And we're very well of that. But I would say, Harald, how the CSO role will evolve, it's a very interesting time in corporate sustainability right now, as we know. Right? Regulations are coming. And so it's becoming much more highly regulated. Whereas most of our careers, it was very aspirational. We would set goals and targets, but now it's very regulated. You have to be very careful about what you say. And there's a big push to make sure that everything you're doing in sustainability and social impact is creating more value. So it's getting tougher and tougher. And so the roles of the CSO and the CFO are coming together more and more because we're finding those intersections. And so I don't want to predict, but I would foresee that, yes, that is where we're going to see much more convergence. CSO, CFO coming together and building that sustainability imperative much more into how the company is run financially.
So many wise words. I think we can do another hour and continue this conversation. I'm so lucky, or we are so lucky, because we will see you again in, let's say, the summer when we look at the next North American Chief Sustainability Officers for our award in September, again during Climate Week. And you confirmed or you agreed for us to join our jury. So I'm very pleased to announce, and again, thank you for your service so far and for staying connected and helping us, shine a light on the role of the CSO as you so perfectly did in this podcast and with your career so far. I'm really excited what is going to become next after your sabbatical. Enjoy everything. Maybe go to Japan and an onsen as a one of these things. It's actually on my list for this year, hopefully. I don't know, to go to the expo in Japan, Osaka. So let's see, maybe. Thank you so much, Michael. It has been a pleasure as always. And thank you so much for your great work, your service, and your leadership. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Harald. I've really enjoyed speaking with you today, and it will be my honor to be on the jury. And thank you for inviting me.